year were you born?
1938.
Okay.
I'm
So,
84 now, and I'll be 85 in July.
what's your birthday?
July 9th. We grew up on very poor on a farm, a tobacco farm in North Carolina. And sometimes people like to know that. They say, well, how'd you come so far from a sharecropper's son to a pilot and owning an airplane? Well, it wasn't easy. You know, first of all, you know, you have to have tenacity, and I didn't realize how poor I was until after I had gotten older. I knew other kids had stuff I didn't have, but I said, what? You know?
So when you're sharecropping, okay? Like how young were you when you started sharecropping?
Well, you know, you. There were 7 people in my family. I have 2 brothers and 4 sisters. And if you're old enough to do something, you work on the farm. You know, it's like, I don't know, when you become like 6, 7, 8 years old, if there's something you can do, like when, you know, taking weeds out of the field or whatever, you know, that's what you did.
Yeah.
And all the time, as you get a little bit older and older, you think about, how am I going to get out of this? You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, I was the first one in my family to finish high school, and then I was the only one in my family to have a bachelor's degree, you know.
Wow.
So it's just one of those things where you say, well, I know there's more to life than this.
Was there anybody that inspired you to want to become a pilot specifically?
No.
Okay.
Everybody was saying you can't become a pilot, so.
Wow, so you getting a lot of discouragement.
Well, what inspired me to become a pilot, there was somebody, but I didn't know the person. This was during World War II. I saw this airplane fly over the farm during World War II, and he was flying really, really low. He was flying so low that I could see the pilot in the airplane. And I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I saw that, and I said, wow, that's what I want to do.
Wow. Do you know what?
Because he flew over this field, and at the end of the field, he pulled it straight up and went straight up in the air. And I said, how cool is that?
Wow.
So that's what inspired me to become a pilot. Well, I didn't know what kind of airplane it was at that time, but I later learned that it was a P-40. I remember that plane. I'll never forget it. I can see him right now. Living in North Carolina, there's a fort there, and I think this airplane probably came from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And, you know, they would go out and practice and do maneuvers, and I guess they fly wherever they wanted to fly. And I guess, you know, they ended up over our farm.
Were you working at the time, or were you playing in the field? What were you doing out there?
Must have been working.
Wow. And then you looked up, and it was just flying over you.
Yeah, he was there before you knew what happened, because you didn't hear it too long, and then you saw it coming real quick, and it was gone.
Was that the first airplane you'd seen?
Yeah, that's the first airplane I saw, and there weren't any airports. I lived out in the country. You didn't see any airplanes. I did, as I got a little bit older, there was an old guy that had his own little airport and had a little airplane that every now and then you see. But that was after I was older. Oh, yeah, Tuskegee Airmen, you know, they flew. You know, they were my heroes.
Yeah.
All those guys, the mechanics, the pilots. I played the guitar, bass guitar, and I hated music when I was in high school. and then I started working right after high school. I went to work in a hospital, and down in the you know, they had a locker room where, you know, the guys and the girls would go down and they change, you could shower or whatever you want to. And there was a guy that had a guitar down there one day, and he started playing this thing, and I looked, I said, that's pretty cool. I said, I wonder if I could do that. So I said, I think I want to do it. And I bought a $5 guitar, you know, and then, of course, people in my house, because at that time I was probably, I don't know, 19 years old, and they don't want to hear you strumming on the guitar and don't know how to play. So you're going to find a place or go outside or somewhere, and you keep. I never learned to read music, but I had a very keen ear, and if I hear a song, I could play it. I just practice.
So you were inspired by a man that just had a guitar in the locker. Was he playing the guitar in the locker room?
Yeah, he come down. He bring the guitar to work, and he come down and play some blues and stuff like that. And I said that's pretty cool. You know, he and I were about the same age. You know, and I said, and I just sit and watch his fingers. You know, see how he did, and I said I can do that. You know.
Yeah.
And it goes from there, you know. If you get good enough, and where you learn to get jobs playing for, like, college fraternity parties, and then the word gets around, well, they say, that group is such and such, they're good, you know, they're great. And then the word gets around, and then, you know, then you can just ad-lib, you know.
Oh, my goodness. What type of places did you play?
Mostly fraternities. But then, and then again, you know, people like Chuck Berry, they use, you know, you get in touch with a radio station, the disc jockey there, and get to know him. Well, Chuck Berry didn't have a band. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Mm-mm.
And his music was pretty simple. It's easy to play. So what he would do, if he was coming to the city, this town, he would say, who's the best band you got there that can back me? And then the radio guy, the disc jockey, would say, well, I've got the Scepters, like George's band. They're good. So you can use them. So that's how you play at different places. You play for fraternity, you play for junior, senior prom. But if you were playing for black people, it was most of, like a place like a juke joint. But most of the money were from the fraternities, the colleges. We had a band. He went on TV one night on a country western show. This guy had a nightclub, but he had a TV show. And on that TV show, it was centered around country western music. And he wore like bib overalls, and he was barefoot.
Wow.
And his pants leg roll hair way up. Wore straw hair, you know, playing that role of country.
Yes.
But he owned a nightclub like in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we played at his nightclub, and he said, you know, you guys are good. You want to be on my TV show? Yeah, sure, why not? So, of course, we didn't play the country music we could have, because we said we could play anything. But we played one song, Fast Domino, Hello Josephine. You know, it's that's the way it was.
Wow. Did your band have a name?
Well, I think at that time they were the Scepters, Scepters, but you probably won't see anything if you Google something like that. But you would see something, one of the bands that I played for every now and then, if you Google this, like his name was Doug, D-O-U-G, Doug Clark, and the Hot Nuts.
So primarily, what type of music did you play?
Well, it was rock and roll, rhythm and blues.
Rock and roll.
If you noticed in my hangar, you know, when your dad was talking about, I have a new bass guitar sitting there now that I said I was going to learn to play music again. Did you notice that?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
You played it down. You didn't tell me I mean, my goodness, if you played a Fats Domino song on a country western TV show, and and you played with Doug Clark and the Hot Nuts, and you had your own band with the Scepters, and you opened for Ike and Tina Turner. I mean, you didn't just dibble dabble. I mean, you were really playing.
Yeah, and like I say, Chuck Berry didn't have a band, so he'd come to town, he'd use us. A guy that does what he does and loves it and try to get the most out of life, and that's about it. The largest show, well, that was with somebody like Ike and Tina Turner, James Brown and the Famous Flames. We'd do the opening act, and when they take the intermission, we would play.
So you said so all of these shows, Ike and Tina Turner, James Brown, Chuck Berry, this was between 1960 and 1963. Now, while you were a musician, were you a full-time musician, or did you do some other stuff on the side?
I'm the only one in the band that had a job. I had a full-time job. Yeah, I was working in a hospital.
And what was the job at the hospital?
Well, some of them made me sound kind of gross, but I first started working in what they call the linen room, and then I worked in the morgue for like a year, and then I worked in psychiatry as a nursing assistant. My job was to clean the floor and sometimes stitch bodies back together. So, my life may sound kind of crazy.
Wow.
You worked in a morgue? Yeah.
How old were you when you were drafted?
I was 25 years and 7 months, almost too old for the draft. So I was referred to as an old man during the training because most of the kids were like 17, 18 years old.
Wow. What was it like having to transition from being at the hospital and being a musician to being in the military?
I thought they were all crazy, like the drill sergeants, which I became one of those too. I was a drill sergeant for 4 years when it should have been like for 2 years. So I thought they were all crazy. Transitioning from that, why are they yelling at me? And you got to do all this. It was quite a transition. You
were a drill sergeant for 4 years, but I'm assuming it took some time to build up to being a drill sergeant. So
well, no, they say at the end of each tour, like you have different what they call MOS, military occupational specialty.
Okay.
Well, my specialty was infantry. You go in there, you're the ones that go out there and fight in the trenches. When that's your MOS, you may get any kind of job. So like, my last job was I was teaching ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps at the University of New Hampshire. I taught at a college before my last few years in the Army. First, you got to go to basic training. Then you go to advanced training. They call it AIT if you're infantry, Advanced Infantry Training. So that went further south, Georgia, Fort Gordon, Georgia, and Fort Benning, Georgia. I didn't go to Vietnam because I was on this drill sergeant duty, which lasted 4 years because there was a shortage of drill sergeants. Then, to become a drill sergeant, which is special duty, you got to go to this drill sergeant school, which is, they treat you pretty mean, because they want to treat you pretty mean because you're going to treat other people mean when you're finished. We came out of Vietnam in 1973.
Yes.
I was drafted in 64, and then you go to various assignments. Like I went from infantry training to Fort Benning, Georgia, which is near Columbus, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went from there to, you go to Korea. I went to Korea and stayed like 14 months. And then you come back, and then you go to other assignments. Oklahoma, then go from Oklahoma back to Berlin. You go to Europe, and you go to each assignment. And when you finish one, you go back to another one. Back from Berlin to they said, now you're going to go to drill sergeant school. That's your next assignment in Washington State, Fort Lewis, Washington.
Wow.
So you go there, you finish that after 4 years. Then I go back to Korea and another assignment. And then from Korea back to the United States. And from there, then I go back to Europe again. And then back from Europe, back to the University of New Hampshire.
Got it. And where in Europe were you after you went to...
Well, I was in a little town out in the country called Gelnhausen, but then I ended up in Frankfurt, Germany. You know, I was a commander there, and then give you an opportunity while you're in places like that. It gives you an opportunity to travel to other countries. You know, stuff like Holland, and you go to Paris, and you know all the various areas around. You know, throughout Europe, and it was easy and it was cheap. You know, you could get on a train or you could drive. You know, you just go. You know, where I learned to fly was at the University of New Hampshire.
Okay.
That's where I learned to fly. I was drafted in '64. I wanted to fly helicopters. I wanted to be a military pilot, fly helicopters. So in 1966, they said, no, you can't go, you're too old. But a year later, the Vietnam War was continuing to build, and then they said, oh, you can go to flight school now, we need pilots. But then I changed my mind. I don't know why. Maybe I got scared or whatever. You could call it whatever you like, but I didn't go. You know?
Yeah.
And I said, George, if you're going to fly, you better do it now. George, if you're going to fly, you better do it now. So I learned to fly at the University of New Hampshire 20 years later, 1985. And of course, by this time, I'm in my 40s. But it was at the university. The university had a flying club.
T-34, is that the first plane you've ever owned?
That's the first one I've ever owned because from the time I learned to fly until 2015 when I owned my airplane, you know, you go to, since I was a retired military, I go to the military aero clubs like McGuire Air Force Base and March Air Force Base, and you rent their airplanes. And then finally, I was able to afford my own airplane 8 years ago, 2015, when I got my own airplane. Now, if you notice on the wall in my hangar, there were other T-34 airplanes on the wall, they were from the March Air Force Base Aero Club. Those are the planes I used to fly before I got my own airplane.
So how many different types of planes have you flown?
Well, it's big basic airplanes like Cessnas and Pipers, and of course the T-34 and of course the Beechcrafts. And that's I have flown a lot of different airplanes, and I have flown a jet. I got about 20 hours in flying a jet Warbird. That was owned by my friend, and the one I flew was the L-29. Let's see, you asked me what some of the proudest moments.
Yes.
I'd like to share. Well, the proudest moment I'd like to share would be when I went on stage with the ACE, Tuskegee Airmen, to receive an award at the San Diego Air and Space Museum.
Wow.
And that was one of my proudest moments to escort him on stage because I was the chapter president of San Diego, and that's my town. So I escorted him on stage, and everyone was introduced. They introduced me as a Tuskegee Airmen chapter president, and escorting this gentleman on stage to receive his award.
Wow. And this was when you escorted Lee Archer.
Yeah, Lee Archer. Yeah.
And what year was this?
Maybe 2010, 12, somewhere around. I'm not sure what year. Well, getting my private pilot's license in age in the 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and escorting the Tuskegee Airmen Ace on stage.
Yeah.
And the next proudest one would be owning my T-34.
In what ways has becoming a pilot opened doors for you and like giving you experiences you wouldn't have had?
It opens the way you meet a lot of people. You know, you do air shows, if you want to refer to something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as, of course, working at an airport, being a pilot helps if you want to become an airport manager.